Hey everybody, this is Allan Ting, TEDx speaker, #1 bestselling author, and founder of Remarkable Parenting Academy. I'm really excited to bring Dr. Stephen onto our expert series interview. So today's topic is about healing the distracted child, the ADHD, and attention through elemental wisdom. And Dr. Steven, who I've been following for the last 5 years, is a phenomenal gentleman, serves from the heart. And I had a chance to meet with him this year backstage. And he is so generous that he worked with me. He shared all this wisdom. Took about 45 minutes just to talk with me alone before he got on stage. So what I love about Dr. Steven is that he's a medical board certified pediatrician with over 30 years of clinical experiences working with children. And the other aspect I love about it is he blends the Eastern philosophy and the Western philosophy together because he really believes in this whole person approach. Because oftentimes this Western psychology, ADHD, it's about focusing on just one aspect, right? So what he brings is not just the physical, the long-term relationship, the emotional, the learning challenge. I just can't speak enough about Dr. Stephen. And without further ado, Dr. Stephen, welcome to our show.
Well, thanks, Alan. It's a pleasure to see you again. We had a fun time backstage. That was a pretty incredible presentation. You know, these 500 kids from around the world, 50 countries, and to be able to be part of inspiring them to be the future leaders. So I was in mode, and then I saw you, and we had a good talk because you're one of these people making a difference in the world. So I call those people like you heroes because every kid I sit down with, I ask, and parents too, what is a hero? Not Spider-Man or Superman, a real hero in the real world. A fireman is a hero. So what are the qualities of a hero? And we deconstruct that. And everybody has their own imagery of what a hero is to them. It's not just killing the bad guys. There's way more to being a hero. So immediately when I saw you backstage, some of the qualities that you possess have some of these hero qualities. Your dedication to helping parents and to be a guide to people. One of the hero qualities I ask kids as I go through this group of qualities that I've collected over the years, some of it related to the five elements stuff, is never gives up. And I ask every kid, so is that a quality? Never, sometimes, or always. And every kid says, always, Dr. Steve, always, never gives up. So you have that. And that's one of those high qualities. So is kindness, caring, helping. You know, many of these qualities that we understand, bravery in the face of change, in the face of challenge, right? As opposed to resisting change, which is what a lot of people get caught in. So, this concept of being a hero in the world that you're embodying, that many of the listeners to your podcast, who by definition being parents, have hero qualities. Every parent I've ever met is a hero to me because they're dedicating something of their time and their life and their finances to their child. Well, that dedication, that devotion is a hero quality.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a mic drop right there.
Well, it's interesting. I think I talked to you about this last time. I think I did anyway, because I do so many talks and I never know what I've said to who. But Mary Oliver, one of my heroes as a poet that's very well known and beloved around the world, has this phrase that attention is the beginning of devotion. And so all the listeners who have children who have been given the label of attention deficit disorder or anxiety or autism or allergies or any of the big labels that start with the letter A, which all have one thing in common, and that's alienation, the big A. There is this thing that we want to understand that every kid with ADHD is paying attention to something. It's impossible to pay attention to nothing. So even a kid who's spacing out, looking out the window, is thinking about a rocket ship to Mars, right? And so what we devote ourselves to is what we pay attention to. And often the challenge is when we say to a kid, you're not paying attention to what I want you to pay attention to. And that creates enormous tension, friction, anxiety, stress, worries, overwhelm on both parties. Whether it's a teacher or a parent trying to get a kid dressed in the morning and they're like playing with their Legos, building the rocket ship to Mars or whatever. So we have to always start as a basic holistic principle in asking what's right with my child before you ask what's wrong with your child. And then we start looking for the qualities that are the gift, right? What's right with my child is like saying, what's something that I absolutely love about this kid? Because you can capitalize on that. You can expand that. You can grow that into a real power in the world, as opposed to opposing that or denying that or ignoring that and just going for what's wrong. That child will automatically feel judged and in some ways not seen for who they are. And nobody likes that. That's a quality of shaming. Many of the labels that I was trained to give children tend to shame them. It doesn't necessarily ennoble them and build them up and make them feel powerful in the world. So we want to embrace those qualities of what's right with a child. What do you love about this child? And how can we use that and grow the areas that are more immature or underdeveloped or not working for him? Look, you've done a lot of stuff in your life. I know a little bit about you. And in business, where you have a CEO running a business, I love replacing CEO with NEO, neo for the neocortex, which is our God-given gift as humans. It rises us above the animals and above the reptiles. And we do have a reptile brain and we do have an animal brain, but the neo, like in the Matrix, Neo is the hero, right? He evolves. And we all have been given that. And that neocortex has all these capacities that are remarkable, but the CEO has to have everybody else working for them effectively. And so we have these different skill sets, executive functions, right? We have planning ahead and retrospecting behind and empathy for others, a moral compass and metaphor, which is a human gift. You know, an animal, my dog, I love my dog, but my dog can't see how the fire hydrant is like a tree. I'll pee on both of them, but not necessarily see how they're the same, right? That's a poet. That's so if I take those five, we can break down the five powers very simply with the five things I just said. So the metaphor is the water power. Planning ahead is wood power. Empathy for others is earth power. The moral compass is metal or gold power. And optimism, looking on the bright side, is firepower. In the simplest boiled down terminology, these are executive functions that every kid has to develop in order to find their greatness in the world. And yet when you go to a psychologist, and I'm a developmental pediatrician, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, although I've used medication in kids, of course. You have to elevate the so-called executive functions because that executive in business has to also be a CEO who knows how to run a business and plan ahead. We're moving the business to Shanghai or where we have to have this big vision, wood power. We also have to look back at where we came from and recognize our roots because it's humbling to see where we've come from. Some of the great billionaires I've worked with, the really great ones, have that humility to know where they came from, to know their roots, to look back and say, look how far I've come. If you don't look back at all, there's danger that you're going to fall off a cliff. You're going to make a mistake that you made before. So the water power is the ability to look back, to retrospect, to see how this is like that, the metaphor quality. I'll give you an example for you, Alan. How is talking to me like talking to somebody else? You talk to a lot of people. Let's use the water power to really demonstrate what I'm talking about to people. So how is this conversation similar to another conversation you've had?
It's very different because with well, it depends on who I speak with, right? And I speak with many experts and psychologists, psychiatrists, health coaches, all that stuff. What's beautiful about our conversation is that we can go deep, not only deep, but also there's a lot of clinician out there who speaks theoretical or theoretically,
Right.
but what you bring to the table is not just a theory part, but actually the execution part, um, and practicality. Really, it's what I love about your work is, like I said, I've been studying your book, reading your book, Fire Child, Water Child, and really embrace what you have to offer is because of the practicality part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a very conscious effort, right? But you fell into a trap because I said, how is this the same or similar to other people you've talked to? And you immediately went to how it's different. So that's the metal side. That's the gold, is being able to see differences. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a quality because you highlighted me in a beautiful way that I'm very grateful to. And gratefulness is part of metal. That you elevated me, you said this is unique. Steve is talking in, deep and practical. That's all great, but think back now at how this is similar to some other engagement in your life. Could be your own life, other people that you've talked to. This stretches your mind to see connections that aren't obvious. That's water. So now, even though you know about me and you're elevating me to be this cool, unique guy, but now try to connect me to someone similar or has a theme that resonates in a similar way. That takes a little more depth of work. And when I get teach kids to do this simple thing, wow, you see their attention shift into a much larger encompassed way. The simplest game, talking about practical, the simplest game, are we being seen on this or we're just going to be heard?
Both.
So if you're being seen, I'm going to play the game with you. Ready? This is a game I play with all kids called the this and that game. Here, I'll use these two objects. All right. So Alan, tell me three ways these guys are the same.
They're both stuffed animals.
Okay.
Um, let's see.
Now you got to stretch your mind to find the similarities. It's easy to see the difference. That's the gold. But to see the similarities, really stretch your mind.
Yep.
There's a kung fu exercise I teach kids to help with this. Breathe in and make two fists. Blow out with your mouth and open your fists while focusing, and the answer will come to you how they're the same.
We got it. They both have eyes. They
There
both
you
have
go.
hands.
So
They have nose and mouth.
there you go. So when you can see connections to two seemingly different things, it's not so threatening. There's comfort in that. Oh, this is like the time when I, spoke to so and so, Steve, and so new situations when you can make a connection to something that's similar allows you to have a certain bravery to face the challenge of something new with a little ease, a little confidence, right? That's water feeding wood. Wood is courage to seek a challenge, to take a risk. It's less of a risk when there's something familiar in it. And that's what water is doing. We call it the water in on planet Earth is the great solvent. You can dissolve many, many things in water. It's one of the only substances that it's called the great solvent. But we're solving problems. So it's a solvent by seeing connection. Simple game, very practical, very deep, to your point, right? So there are games that I play with kids to develop these CEO skills to round out whatever their primary mode of their primary hero is that we want to expand so they can actually be successful in the world. Let's have a conversation about success. It's a tricky word. What does success mean to you?
It evolved throughout the years. Currently, it's being aligned with my mission, my passion, and my inspiration to do whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want, and with whom on this podcast that I want.
Beautiful. What a great answer. Because it has inspiration, fire. It has mission, wood, right? The passion is fire. The mission is wood. This freedom to do it wherever, with whoever. And this is a lot of wood. This is big, Tony Robbins' visionary view of freedom, right? And I think success is built on that inspiration and passion. When I talk to people about success, I use the word growth, to never stop growing. Now, there are 5 different or 6 different places we could grow. There's growing socially, meeting new people, having a widening group of people around you that have your back, that support you, friends and lovers and family, right? That's a form of success, that expanding allies, friends, social connections. There's economic growth, which is an ever expanding base of finances that support this vision you have, your mission. So we know economic growth, social growth. There's emotional growth, which I call the willingness to have as many feelings as possible, not just happy. Happy is a dangerous feeling when we isolate. When a parent says to me, I just want Billy to be happy. I just want my kid to be happy. That's dangerous because that means every other emotion is bad and only happy is good. That's a road to addiction. So there's nothing wrong. How many kids I have to explain sad is not bad, mad is not bad? These are expressions. This is the weather inside you at any given time. It rained last night here in the Northeast, and now it's sunny, and it's a beautiful fall day. That's the emotion. It's always changing. It's our experience of change. So now we have this kind of social growth, emotional growth. It's the whole crayon box of feelings that you can feel and get over and have another feeling and get over and have another. Just keep having feelings, not being afraid to feel, right? There's physical growth, which is not just in height, but in the ability to get sick and get better, that kind of resilience, to get hurt and recover. That's a form of success too, right? There's the kind of growth that a lot of people think of in the world of education, which is intellectual growth, to never stop learning. One of the things I really enjoyed about you, Allan, was when we sat down backstage, you were open and curious and, oh wow, that's interesting. Wow, that enthusiasm, that willingness to learn, that's success. And then so we have these 5, right? Intellectual growth, economic growth, emotional growth, social growth, physical growth. And in the very center of that hand of success is spiritual growth, right? This willingness to go deep into what we believe in, what moves us. There's wonder in the world. Now imagine if these 5 fingers were the guiding principle in school, then you wouldn't have the crisis of ADHD that we have today. because it's elevated so high, right? A teacher making something curious for a kid who's bored in the class is a game changer. I had ADD. They didn't call it that back in the 60s, but I had a teacher who changed my life because she saw me sitting in the back making paper airplanes and throwing them to my friends at the front of the class, getting sent to the principal, and my clever drawings and things. And she said, somehow she knew I was smart. I thought I was dumb. I was hanging out with the dumb kids in the back because they were more fun. She took me aside, and for the first time in my life, besides my loving parents, she saw me. And within 3 months, I was the smartest kid in the class. She used it was like magic. She dedicated time, there's that devotion, to see me and to kind of inspire in me participation in what was going on in the classroom. But dedicating time just to me, right? That a lot of teachers say, I don't have time to do that. Or if I did it for him, then I have to do it for everybody. And my answer to that is then do it for everybody. I'd rather you spend time inspiring a kid in the class than teaching the lesson because you'll get more bang for your buck. And so, this is a challenge. I don't want to put down teachers because they have a rough job. It's very hard. My hat's off to them because they are in a no-win situation. They're being bared down by the administration who wants the curriculum done. The parents are complaining, right? They have a curriculum they have to get through. We've crunched the amount that we want kids to learn without play anymore. There are some schools of kids I take care of where they've eliminated recess. The one thing most boys live for in school, what's your favorite part of the day? Recess, right? Where I can go let loose and play with my friends, right? They eliminate it. Or they cut it down to 10 minutes after lunch.
That was me,
Yeah,
by the way.
there
I
was,
hated elementary school, even though we
yep,
had recess, but
yeah.
I just couldn't sit down. And it's actually funny you mentioned that. It has nothing to do with play because by the time I got to middle school, we had to rotate, to different class every 50 minutes or so. And I loved it.
Me too. I had the same experience, right? Where I could get up after 40 minutes and move really freed me because I needed to move. And they were making me sit in a seat like a torture chamber. And then I was getting in trouble for wiggling around and, shuffling my feet. And, I loved to climb trees when I was a kid. So I just needed to move. I once saw a kid who they said had ADD and dyslexia. This was a wood kid, very energized, very much about movement. And I said, well, let me do an experiment with this kid. It's just out of the box thinking. I asked him to read. He was sitting down and he really couldn't read. I said, I don't believe this. So I was in my New York City office. I took him out on the street, him, me, and his mother, with a book, and we went for a walk. And he read perfectly fine as long as he was walking. Like freaked everybody out. I was like, what? I didn't even know he could do this. Happy as a clam as long as he was moving. But sit him still, and that was like going against his nature. You know, so so the problem, I guess the philosophy that I use in the books I've written and the talks I've given around the world is one size doesn't fit all. That's really the overriding principle that there is no 180 because that reduces us to these like robots, right? That's robot medicine. It was a movie star whose kids I was taking care of, and he himself said to me, Steve, what I like about you is you're not one of those robot doctors. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, they just, talk this kind of talk that is, like you said earlier, theoretical without kind of making it human, making it real, making it personal, making it individual, right?
Yeah, this is love where the conversation is going. It's everything you brought up just makes sense. This is we say the same at Remarkable Parenting Academy, which is one size parenting doesn't work because if you have more than one kid, you quickly realize your daughter and your son or whatever kid you have, they have very different personalities.
Yeah.
And going back to the CEO analogy, if you ever work in a team environment and or if you've been a boss or in a leadership position, you quickly realize that everybody works differently, right? And on top of that, they have different personalities and they're also motivated differently. So you also cannot use a one size management approach to.
Exactly. And people who do generally either can't keep people in, or they're firing people all the time, or they're very disgruntled workers, right? Because nobody's being seen for their uniqueness, their individuality. I love the word remarkable that you're using in your title of Remarkable Parenting. I think it's a really important word because remarking, what is remarkable is what is unique. And I find a lot of medicine that I was trained in and all the great centers in New York City, all these ivory tower places, tries to box things, right, into this way of labeling that eliminates the remarkable, or let's say is resistant to the complexity that each of us carries with us, right? And there's a thing that a lot of parents will say to me, well, how come when he's on Minecraft, he has no problem paying attention for 10 hours, or building with his Legos, or organizing his Pokemon cards? So why is that? And my answer is always the same. Context matters. A disease doesn't change with context. You don't have diabetes in one room and no diabetes in another room. So we have to stop thinking of ADHD as a disease and understand that they're dependent on the situation. There, I could put you in a room with nothing in it except one of my old physics books and make you read it, and then I could take notes through a two-way mirror. Check, 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 check. This guy's looking around. He's bored. He's not doing anything for him. Maybe you love physics. I don't know, Alan. But for someone who doesn't, now they've done the checklist of symptoms: impulsive, distracted, hyperactive, of ADHD. And that's like not fair, right? Because in another context, you're like in the zone. Right now, you're in the zone. So context matters because it's part of our complexity. In quantum physics, there's a very um, great man called Carlo Rovelli. He's really brilliant, brilliant writer. He's written really great books trying to explain quantum physics. And one of the principles that he uses is that we are nothing but relationships. And the American Academy of Pediatrics also has started using a term. I'm on one of their committees for children with developmental disorders that we've been pushing for called relational health. Now, here is one practical American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement and one wacky quantum physics speaking the same language, that we are nothing but relationships. That's our context, speaking through us, around us, with us, right? And so when I use the 5-element model, those are relationships. We don't want to separate them. Water is related to wood. Water feeds wood. Water comes down the mountain of stone, so that metal is the mother of water. There's a relationship there, right? Just like the seasons. Water is winter, wood is spring, fire is summer, earth is harvest, and autumn is this metal, this gold power. And they're all related to each other, both in the feeding process, right? Water feeds wood, wood feeds fire, fire feeds the earth, the soil makes the metals, and from the top of a mountain you get water, just like the seasons. But there are also these challengers. Water cools down fire. So if you have a fire kid using water power within yourself, as a parent, you have a, a challenging, powerful way of parenting. Now, water doesn't say a whole lot. Yelling at your fire kid is wood on fire. They're the people who yell. And so when you throw too much wood on fire and you've got a forest fire. You've now set them off. Water steps back. It's kind of like Clint Eastwood. It's like doesn't say a whole lot. Just stands there and says, very kind of powerful, Zen. Fire people don't know what to do with that. Fire people are like the class clown, jokey kind of people telling fart jokes in the middle of third grade and, trying to lighten everybody up because they want to have fun. So too much water is threatening to a fire kid, but just enough cools them down, softly speaking, whispering even, moving slowly, listening before you speak, not just reacting. That's a parenting method that goes across the relationships. That's a relationship. Fire melts gold. Often the fire kids are getting in trouble in a classroom, which is very much the metal place. Rules, follow rules, curriculum. That's very metal. They're order. It's all about order. When fire is out of control, when a kid is immature and has fire ADHD symptoms, they're creating chaos in a classroom. And a metal teacher will not appreciate that because they're trying to maintain order, and this kid is just the class clown. So that's another relational place that can be mended or harmonized, right? Harmonizing relationships is my medicine. That's rounding out the CEO. And there are all kinds of ways we can use a million examples. If we had a call-in parent, I could show you how it works practically. We could break it down and we would show you the map. We would create a map of a child. You've seen me do it, right? And all of a sudden you see, the two arms and the two legs of, an earth hero, and you have to get them all working for them. And it becomes really fun and individualized, customized. Sometimes when I do this, you see where the conflicts are in the house. You have a wood parent and an earthy kid. Wood parent is go, 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 let's go. You're not moving it. Come on, let's go, 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 go. Type A kind of movers and shakers, and an earth kid who just wants to cuddle and be sweet. And they look at it as kind of weak or mushy or it doesn't have any backbone or something. And so you have to actually find a bridge between them.
You just described my relationship with my daughter.
There you go. Yeah, you have to be careful that the understanding is the love.
Yeah.
And so the bridge between wood and earth is fire. Wood feeds fire, to the earth. So fire is a sense of humor. And when a wood parent has a sense of humor, they can laugh at themselves and they can laugh at each other. With an earth child, you've married them in a way that harmonizes them, where it's not just conflict all the time. Because we all have button pushers. We all have people that trigger us. And when we're looking at those button pushers, I always remind parents, or anybody, teachers, parents, that there are buttons. Nobody's doing this on purpose. You have been given this button to transform yourself. That's what the button is. If someone's pissing you off, look at what it is in yourself that's intolerant of that. And what is it being asked to change within yourself?
Yeah, with that button, I have a core belief that our kids are our best teachers.
Oh, 100%.
And my daughter, so speaking of fire, which is laughter and joy, so she brings a lot to our relationship. And in many ways, she's like the leader that I'll look up to. I'm like, you
The
know,
light in the room.
this is what I was missing. And she'll walk around like a little crab. She'll go, la 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 la, walk around circles, and it just makes me laugh, makes me giggle.
Which lightens you up. That's the purpose of fire people on planet Earth. That's their purpose, is to lighten people up, bring light on a cloudy day. And that cloud can be an emotional cloud, right? And when we embrace that, when she feels seen for that, there are other areas that may be deficient in her. Fire people may need a little of the gift that you have of water and wood. You have a lot of water and wood. That when you can embrace her fire light, that lightheartedness in yourself, water people can go very dark, very deep, and it can be hard. But when you can connect to that, it will feed your wood and make you want to do more in the world because you've been inspired by her. My kids were my first great teachers. In fact, I named my book Fire Child, Water Child because one of my children is more of a fire child and one is more water. They're mixes. None of us are archetypes. We're all mixes of all five. But there's one dominant theme that you see early on when a kid is, 6 months, 7 months old. They start coming out of themselves. I did studies on looking at hundreds of kids to see whether I could figure this type out and then follow it for years. There are kids that are now in their 30s that I've followed, and it's consistent. Yeah, they go through phases of different elements, but they always have that one underlying theme. And I realized when my second kid was born, how is this possible that out of the same womb, with the same parents, living in the same house, eating the same food, listening to the same music, going on the same vacation, how could two kids be so different? That must mean something, right? Divine energy didn't do that by accident. So how come they didn't teach me that in my training as a pediatrician, right? And I was a little pissed. I said, I need to know more about it. It has to mean something, right? It's not just genetics. There's a bigger thing going on here. So that started me on this path of going back and looking at some of my old martial arts, kung fu stuff, and then getting swept up in studying Chinese medicine and at what this could mean. And that's how I went into this world of recognizing, one of the first places I started looking at it was not ADHD, it was asthma, interestingly. And I realized, oh, there are 5 different types of asthma. How come they never taught me that? And 5 different approaches to treating asthma or anxiety. There are 5 different types of anxiety, not one. And if you don't approach it properly, because it's dependent on who is having the anxiety, here are the 5 anxieties in a nutshell. There's worry, which I call the what ifs. There's what we'll call OCD anxiety, which is getting stuck on things. There's kind of depressive anxiety, kind of shut down, fear, running away, terror, kind of PTSD anxiety. There's the angry anxiety, right? I'm going to be late. Beeping your horn, leaning on your horn on the freeway or whatever, right? That's anxiety covered up with anger. And there's panic, like just panic attack, right? So Earth is the what if worry. The OCD type is the metal anxiety. The depressive, going in a hole, never coming out of your room, can't getting out of bed, is water anxiety, fear, deep fear, PTSD fear. The wood is that angry leaning on your horn, I'm going to be late, get out of my way, anxiety. And fire is the panic, the overwhelm, panic attack. They have to be approached differently. Giving them all Prozac is not going to help. It'll help 20%. Same with the ADD meds. It'll help 20% if you're lucky. And the other 80%, you could create more problems. I'm not anti-meds. They help some kids. They can transform some kids. But you got to know who the kid is first. We got to know who someone is before you treat them. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's not the case. What I've seen, and typically, what the ADHD diagnosis starts from the teacher.
Yeah,
The teacher would say, you're not paying attention. Either she's aloof, not checked out, or your boy's not sitting down. He's very hyperactive, can't stay focused.
right.
Maybe your kid has ADHD. Then the mom takes, to a pediatrician, and then they do this checklist. I'm like, oh, your kid does have
Yeah,
ADHD.
but that
So
went around because they already said, taking your temperature and saying you have a fever. It hasn't told you anything a good mother who puts her hand on the head knew But it's just self-serving because now what? You treat the fever, okay, but you haven't looked under the hood at why the person has a fever. So you just keep taking medication for the fever. In that situation, you may luck out. You take some Advil or Tylenol or something, and the fever's gone the next day, right? Bad medicine would just give you that and say, go home, take some Tylenol. And you'll look out, 20% of the time they just had a cold, they got through the night. Thanks, doc. Another group comes in, a father comes in and says, hey, doc, every time the Tylenol wears off, the fever comes back. And I have to look a little deeper. Maybe you have strep throat or UTI or something, right? It's the same with ADHD. The third kid's dead because they had meningitis. They all had 102. Nobody's denying the symptom. But you got to look behind the symptom. The checklist is just a list of symptoms, their behaviors. There's no blood test for ADHD. There's no MRI or EEG that's going to diagnose ADHD. They're all behaviors, they're all symptoms. They're not a disease. So we want to look under the hood, deeper, deeper. Is this kid, there must be a reason, little Billy can't sit still in class. It's not just because he has the symptom of ADHD. No, what's the medicine always asks what's causing the symptom. That's good medicine.
Yeah, and I love how you bring this up because oftentimes the medicine can mask other symptoms and
That's
you're
right.
not going to root cause. Because one of the parents I was working with, he was taking ADHD, the kid was taking ADHD medication, and it takes him 3 weeks, Dr. Stephen, to have a bowel movement.
Yeah, yeah.
3 weeks.
I've seen that.
Totally blows my mind. This is not healthy.
No, and
There's
not only is it not healthy, you try paying attention when you're carrying around a log of poop in your, colon. It is anybody out there who's had constipation knows it's a burden that's distracting from the inside. So we can be distracted on the inside. I'll give you another example. I see so many kids who come to me with ADHD anxiety, that mix. And it turns out they're locking their diaphragm, right? And so their breathing is all up here in the chest, which causes terrible tension that's distracting them because they're not breathing properly from the belly, the way all babies breathe, where all opera singers breathe, the where all kung fu people breathe is from the belly to release the diaphragm. But when you lock the diaphragm, it's like you're waiting to get punched, like you're bracing yourself. But your airflow is not good. Your oxygenation is not good. And it creates anxiety and distractibility, internally distracted, like the constipation. Or poor diet, right? I do a lot of work with diet. If you're eating crap in, well, your body's processing whatever, is not right for who you are. And the diet is very different too, right? For different kids, what they need. A fire kid burns fuel fast. So they will go hot. They'll have a carb load for breakfast, a bagel and, that's it, or whatever, cocoa nuts. And then an hour later, they're crashing. And when they're crashing, they're distracted and hyper and silly and craving carbs to get themselves high again. And then they crash, and then they're up, then they crash, and they're riding this roller coaster all day long. You just give them some protein with every meal, including snacks, and they're burning a little more evenly, or some oils, fish oils, or omega-3s so they're not this high-low, because the crash is uncomfortable for them too. They're not hangry energy, right? And trying to sit in class an hour or two after breakfast, and they're crashing. That's unique to fire kids. So basic dietary recommendation for fire kids is never a carb without a protein.
I remember you talked about the hypoglycemic index,
Yeah.
right? So especially for fire kids, they get we call in our parenting we call it hangry.
Yeah. And kids get that way too. These are the extroverts. Wood and fire are real extrovert kind of personalities. They burn fuel quickly. They eat the world fast. Fire faster than wood. What could do well with trail mix all day long? Just picking at trail mix, because there are hunters, there are explorers, but now they don't allow nuts in school. So now we're jammed up. I used to help these wood kids. They didn't need medication if they could sort of snack on trail mix all day long. They were even. They were in the zone. Now we don't allow that. So what, I have them munch on turkey bacon and, but I have to write a note to the teachers that they're allowed to have this every hour.
Yeah. And as you're talking about this, the thing that we can do as a parent or a caregiver or a teacher is to assume and quickly say, well, we understand that like the hypoglycemic, but then we like start labeling these kids like these are bad kids.
That's
These are,
right.
and that's the worst thing we can do because we're not looking underneath the hood and see what the root cause of the
Right.
problem. And we just go, it's really easy to judge. This kid doesn't listen, doesn't pay attention, must be a bad kid. It's the ADHD kid. And then what happened is that fits into the persona of the kid. And that kid started believing, oh, I just have ADHD. And what that means is I just got to be on meds. Oh, that just means that I'm just a horrible person. And
Well,
just
that's right. So this is important because I see so many kids that start believing they're bad, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? They start acting like, Billy the Kid. They are now the bad guy. They wear that, right? Or that not just bad, broken, that there's something broken in me. There's something, how parents say, what's wrong with you? So that wrong is broken. It's shaming as opposed to the thing I have every parent put on the refrigerator is what are we practicing together? What are we practicing? Any conflict, any challenge, what are we practicing? What are we working on today together? We're a team. So what is it that we're practicing today? Are we practicing listening? Okay, let's practice listening. Don't just expect your kid to listen. Let's practice listening. There are all different ways to listen, but we need to practice to get better at it. So if your kid happens to not be a good listener, a lot of ADD kids in certain realms, it's actually they're really good at looking, but their looking is much stronger, more superior to their listening. There's a like inequality there. So we want to build the listening up to be matched to their looking, and there are different ways to do that. I'll give you an example, a practical example that works for water ADHD kids, wood ADHD kids, and fire ADHD kids primarily, sometimes even earth. So it's it hit them all equally, but it's a really profound skill that could be practiced. And I do this with kids. I give them like a game, which is I'm going to tell you three commands. I want your eyes closed. I want you to listen to what I'm saying and picture it in your mind. So turn my oral information, what you're hearing, into imagery in your mind. It's a very ancient hunter-gatherer way of paying attention, you know, taking landmarks, keeping imagery in your mind. We've kind of lost that because of the video game world. The visual world is so much stronger. There's so many kids that can play video games with the sound off. They don't need to listen. It all does it for you. So you don't have to envision yourself. So we're giving away one of our ancient skills of picturing in our mind, right? So I give him these three commands, put the fire engine on the floor, take the pirate and put it on the table, and take the blue train and put it by the door. Now open your eyes, don't look yet. Look up, look down, or I ask them to say something to me. What's your favorite color? Something to buy a little time. And if they really turned it into pictures, and I say, okay, go, they're on it. They're confident. They're, boom, firing on the floor. Boom, boom. If they're actually not listening and turning listening into imagery, it goes in one ear and out the other. So one of the basic tricks for improving attention in kids who have been labeled with ADHD is practicing envisioning what you're hearing. These are kids who have very low water power. If their weakest power is water, and people can go to my website, your listeners can go to my website, and there's a link on Who is My Child that'll give you the percentages of wood power, fire power, earth power. So you can see the strongest and the weakest. The weakest is what needs the practice to round out the CEO, which is your strongest, right? But this is someone, whether it's an earth kid or fire kid or water kid or gold kid, who has very low water power, listening power, right? The flip side is someone who has very low earth power, which is that empathy, caring. And somewhere online, on one of my YouTube channels, there's a video I made called Caring is Attention. That's the same thing as Mary Oliver's quote that attention is the beginning of devotion. That when we care about something, we pay attention to it. All the parents listening are paying attention to their kid obsessively because they care about their kid so much. That's attention. They're paying attention. So our challenge is to get a child to care about what the teacher's talking about or what daddy's talking about, right? So caring is earth, and a lot of kids with ADHD have low earth power. So caring starts with conversation. So the conversation you and I are having, Alan, is triggering a kind of dialogue between us that's firing. It's like you get an idea from something I say if you're paying attention. So the conversation is one of these fundamental earth skills that some kids are deficient in who have ADHD symptoms that we want to build up. And that's conversation, that's participation. Once I learned that, my ADD went away. I can talk to anybody anywhere now because I can just zone in on whatever they're talking about or what they're thinking about, what's important to them. And we're in it together then. The simplest way is this. Instead of asking your kid, how was your day? Flip it and say, hey, buddy, ask me about my day. They are now asking because you're getting them to engage in a conversation about you, turning the attention towards you. That will help with their ADHD symptoms. So listening, turning into picturing, and turning conversation into participation, which is a form of caring attention. These are simple skills, but nobody teaches it. We just run to the medication. It's things that any parent can do. They just have to practice. They have to take the time to build the skill. It's like learning to hit a fastball. You got to practice to get good at it or throw a pitch, right? So for thousands of years in Asia, they were training attention. It was that was an understood thing. You can train attention. All the monks in India and China, East Asia, Korea, Japan, they were an art to learn to pay attention.
And I love this because everything you talked about brings back to presence,
Yeah.
having that presence. And when we are in presence, and by the way, none of this is scripted.
No.
I had an idea of the questions I'll be asking you. We use none of that. And I love it
Yeah. It's
because of the
flowing.
presence, the magic that we get to co-create in this
But
space, right?
presence is where the magic is. I call it birthday presence. PRE presence, as in being present, but I call it birthday presence. That you're alive, you're born, right, in this moment. You and I are inventing, riffing as we're going on. I had nothing planned. I knew you're a cool guy, and we're going to come up with something that neither of us thought to talk about. And if you want to do a lightning round questions with me, I'm open to that. If you want to do that, I'm happy to, I'll do whatever you want. I'm open because of presence. Now, presence is different than now. Now is what my dog does. Barks at the mailman like it's the end of the world and then goes and takes a nap. Now, now, not the same as presence. Presence feeds where are we going, being aware of the time that we're online together, being aware of stories that you and I have in our own lives and bringing them into the conversation. So it's the past and the future in the now makes it a big picture. Past, present, and future is presence of mind. That's what a good CEO has. Whereas now brain is a like emergency brain. Now is like living in anxiety because it's such a small little box now. And it's constantly being challenged by not now, which is every transition, every change. That is anxiety provoking. So we have to always differentiate presence from now.
And it sounds like it's more of a survival mode,
It's survival.
whereas the presence is more above the abundance.
It's the master in Zen training. It says they always ask, is the master in the house? That's presence. Are you fully present? 100% present, even though you have something you got to do later and something that you forgot to do before. Are you bringing full attention to a situation?
And this is to dwell on that. This is probably one of the reasons why we're having a crisis in attention deficit disorder right now, because a lot of times they're glued to screen.
Glued to screens or not doing the things that trigger their passion. You know, it's instant gratification. And push this button, get 100 points, which is what most video games are built around, is different than delayed gratification. Delayed gratification is having a long-term goal. You know, I want to get Steve on my podcast. And you were great. You know, we were passing ships behind the scenes, and you were a great conversation. You said, Steve, would you come on? Right? And I said, yeah, I guess, you know, let's see what happens. You know, I've got a lot of commitments and things. You stuck with it. Instant gratification would have said, if I said yes or no in that moment, you would try to nail me down because I might get lost. But you had enough forward thinking to reconnect with me later, to remind me again, to come up with some dates. So that's not instant gratification. That's what we call delayed gratification. You get the dopamine hit from planning ahead. The goal was set. When did we see each other? In the summer. Here we are
July.
in October, right? So that was your long-term stick with it plan, and here we are, right? But someone who lives in instant gratification, which is what video games and TikTok and Facebook and all these things are upon, you know, everything, scrolling, doom, right, is all get the dopamine hit quick, which is very addictive. Delayed gratification dopamine hits are working on building a house, building a barn, building a fort in the backyard, you know, building a Lego set, you know, anything that has, you're not going to do it all today or in this minute. You can have ice cream Sunday. Today's Monday. Are you cool with that? Okay, that's building the muscle of presence. Whereas now is, no, I want it now, I want it now, I want it now, right? And falling down and having a fit. That's a trigger. That's a sign of the addictive personality that our culture, not just screens, but so many aspects of our culture are feeding that instant gratification. School is doing it. You know, you've got to get that A on that test and then forget everything you learned on that test. There's no grandeur in where is this going? You know, how can I use this? Why do I need to know about George Washington? So you get the points on the test and then forget it. That's instant gratification learning, right? And so we have that with eating, fast food eating, instant gratification. Get high now, right? We have it in so many aspects of our culture are built around that instant dopamine hit, and it builds the hero. It doesn't build the presence.
Yeah, and if you guys are hearing about this delayed gratification, Stanford did a test in a study back in the 70s where they did the marshmallow test.
Yeah.
And this is a very long, one of the longest studies they had, like where they tracked the kids from their like 5 all the way up to their 50s and 60s and 70s. It's still, the study's still going on. And one of the key element of success is delayed gratification
Oh, yeah.
versus the
They
kids that
saw
are,
these kids. So it was a psychologist who first did it on his own kids. And then he expanded it. That he said, all right, Johnny, if I'm gonna you there's a marshmallow here. If you don't eat it now, you get two marshmallows later. And then they put him in a room and had a two-way mirror and watched the kid. And it's hilarious. It's on YouTube. You can see some of these. Some kids don't want to look at the marshmallow because they can't bear it. Some kids just eat it. Some kids sit there and go, all right, he said I have to wait. That's fine. I'd rather have two later. Some kids, are talking to the marshmallow. I don't see why, trying to argue it. And so the kid who could wait, 15 years later, when they measured them, they had higher SAT scores. They got into better colleges. And then 10 years later, they were making exponentially more money, more happily married, right? 10 years later, they're even more expanded. I think it's gone 30 years, right? But they redid the study recently, and this is really interesting. Instead of one kid in a room, they had three kids in a room, and they worked as a team to delay gratification. One kid was about to eat, and another kid, probably an earthy kid, said, or a gold kid said, no, no, it's the rules, but, Johnny, don't eat it yet. Wait, wait. As a team, this is that rounding out relationship. They all did better. So that's recent. And it's a spin on the whole thing that when we isolate, and this is an interesting point. In medicine, we tend to isolate the victim, right? You take, you go to the doctor, your wife is with you, she's asked to stay outside, right? With kids, not so much, but even with kids, they're only pointing at, under a microscope, the kid. Nobody's looking at family dynamics, right? Or an elderly person goes in and, you want to bring in family. Here's a story that was very profound in my pediatric practice. And at the time, I had 16,000 patients. We were a very successful practice while I was doing my developmental holistic practice on the side. And a kid, this 12, 13-year-old girl with severe anorexia, I was trying to treat. And she was seeing a psychiatrist, and I was working with her. And three of her friends came in who were all patients of mine too, because I was in a community that took care of everybody. And they said, Dr. Steve, we know what's really going on. Can't we be part of the treatment? The psychiatrist won't let us talk to the psychiatrist. It was like, no, we're not allowed to do that. This is just the child's problem. It's private. And yet they had clues to what was going on that the parents didn't know about. And there was valuable information. And I argued with the psychiatrist. I said, but they want to help. And this kid needs to feel seen by her community. So this isolation in medicine is breaking down relationships, which is how we even exacerbate this kind of pathologizing of behaviors in a big way. We always want to look at the context and the community within which someone is exhibiting behaviors so that we understand the big picture, which is presence.
And I love how this conversation went full circle because it's all about relationship. Because we talked about the relationship from the beginning, right?
A
Because
hundred percent.
as you're talking about this, two thoughts that came up. Number one is a lot of times we for example, Western medication is the the pathology. So what they do is if you have a heart condition, you take medication for your heart.
Yeah,
But then what happens that heart condition, that medication is also very detrimental to your kidney. So you got to
right,
take one for your kidney. And it goes,
right.
and like, how can you treat the entire body who has a ecosystem of all linked and up together and you're trying to treat it separately? You can't do that.
That
Just
is so beautifully said. That is really needs in this conversation because I was trained that way as a Western doctor to, you know, kidney problems go to the renal, nephrologist, heart problems go to the cardiologist, lung problems, and the body doesn't know they're separate, right? The lung and the heart, just that alone, we look at in sports, heart rate variability, right? Heart rate variability is a very important, powerful way of understanding attention and attention, not anxious driven attention. Heart rate variability is this, that when you're really in the zone, your heart rate is listening to your respiratory rate. So it sounds like this. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. That's healthy for wound healing, for full presence attention. I will bet you, Alan, if I hooked you up to an HRV machine, a heart rate variability machine, while you're riding one of your bikes, you'd be in the zone and your heart rate variability would be like golden. It should be wide. That when you breathe in, your heart rate speeds up. When you breathe out, it slows down. Sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic, right? This is a brake system. And it's very healthy. It's been shown to help not just cognitive health, but the healing of wounds and the balance of different endocrine systems, hormone systems, and all these parts of the body that are related to each other. And yet, when you see someone who's stressed and not in the zone, their heart rate goes to dum to dum to dum to dum to dum like a machine because it's not related to anything. So this is a really good point that you're making, that the different parts of the body, if you treat just one, the rest of the family is like, hey, what about me? Yeah, you're helping him, but you're hurting me, right? And the greatest place you see that is in GI doctors, gastrointestinal doctors. They never talk about food, and they never talk about the microbiome, which is one of our greatest communities. Multiple different organisms working for us. If the CEO is up here in the neocortex, and the organs, the heart and the lungs and stuff, are our like administrators that are working for us, the guys down in the trenches are in the microbiome, breaking down information. So you go over there, you go, oh, proteins, we need you over there, and fats, we need you. And yet nobody even looks at it. And that's real science.
That's very powerful stuff. If you guys get a chance, go to Netflix and watch. There's a documentary on the microbiome. It was so fascinating. Long story short was there's a woman who want to upgrade her microbiome, so she got her microbiome from her boyfriend and encapsulated it. I'm not gonna go in detail because it kind of sounds disgusting.
No, no, it's a known thing.
So he's basically eating his feces. That's basically what
That's
it
right.
is. So
And yeah,
the crazy part was she did heal at some level, but she also picked up his anxiety as well.
yeah,
That
yeah, yeah,
was
yeah, exactly. And this is some of the studies, I've done this actually with some very severe autistic kids. It's not easy to do. It's hard to actually get this done. But to your point, you got to know who you're getting the microbiome from because you may induce other things that are carried in that too. Because, they did studies on postpartum depression. And when they improve the microbiome of mothers who have given birth, their anxiety, their postpartum anxiety, depression is improved just by changing the microbiome. So very powerful research in microbiome. Microbiome has a circadian rhythm of activity too. So that woman in the thing you were talking about, maybe she needed to take her boyfriend's poop encapsulated at a different time of the day. Nobody looks at that's called circadian rhythm, and there's huge research on that. And I always ask parents when a kid comes to me with anxiety or ADHD or any disease, any problem that they're struggling with, what time of the day are the symptoms the worst? Because we are the basic sanity of humans. We evolved on this planet as part of the planet. Right? We are, so you have to pay attention to sunrise, to sunset, to when are your symptoms the highest? Why is the blood pressure higher at certain times of the day in certain people? The same goes with attention, right? You want to really look at that because that can be adjusted. That can be a clue to what's going on with your unique child, right? And we are supposed to be, the we can be, is when we're aligned with the day-night cycle and the seasonal cycle, that we're plugged into it, right? It's really important to me to know where the moon cycle is, to know where, just pay attention to it. Sunrise, just when sunrise has a health effect on your mental health, or sunset. Because you know, the field of the light has this healing capacity, calming of change at different times of the day. So dimming the light. So we could say not just the screens, which have no changing lights, but the electric lights, you have to dim them. You know, how many kids, I know we're almost out of time, but I want to tell a famous study on ADHD. So about 20 years ago, a huge study, prospective study out of Oxford, England. It was looking at what are the factors. It was not funded by any drug company, just prospectively looking forward to kids. I think they started at 5 or 6, labeled with ADHD, and they had to be paired with a twin who didn't have ADHD. That was the criteria of the study. And you would think that would be a small group. It was thousands of kids across Europe. And they just tracked them, right? And they just wanted to see what's going on with these kids. They were measuring everything, diet, eating, sleeping, exercise, everything, right? Illnesses, really great study. One of the weird things they found was a certain percentage, a large group, 30, 40%, outgrew their ADHD by the time they were 18. Now that sent shockwaves through the conventional community because they thought, oh, once you have ADHD, you always have it, which is nonsense. But when they looked deeper, one of the factors that determined who outgrew their ADHD was their sleep quality, their circadian rhythm sleep quality. There's healthy sleep and unhealthy sleep. Unhealthy sleep doesn't get deep enough and doesn't come up for air and drop back down like a pulse through the night. They either drop down like a bear and they're dead for the night, or they're at this superficial level and not really going deep. So sleep hygiene is critical for some kids outgrowing their ADHD. That's circadian logic. What I call basic sanity is living with planet Earth, right? Being in nature.
So, Dr. Stephen, if there's one thing you want to share with all the parents out there, like
Hmm.
this burning answer you want to give, what would that be?
Well, I've already said one size doesn't fit all. Embrace the complexity of your child. I think that, really love that, elevate that. But here's the home message. Always see the hero in your child, the inner hero. If you see it in them, they'll see it in themselves. They'll feel seen and they'll rise to the occasion. Try in the stressful job of being a parent, try not to lose that. Even when they're acting out, they're creating chaos, they're driving you nuts, they're pushing your buttons. Try to keep that image of the inner hero waiting to grow, and it's it's and they'll feel it.
And I love that message because there's a study where they see the most successful people in the world and they looked at their strength, where they're average at, and their weakness. And every single one of them that's successful, they would put all their eggs in the basket of what am I great at? What am I strength at? And I don't know about you, but how I grew up was, especially in the Asian culture, is like what you're worse at. Keep
That's right.
working on
That's
that.
right.
And it never served me.
I know, and it's an important point. In the therapies that are out there, speech therapy, OT, even psychology, there are two philosophies. There's one, fix the problem and keep working on that. And another philosophy is strengthen the strength to compensate for the weakness or to embrace that weakness and fold weakness into the strength. Let them work together. And I think you're right that that's what happened to me too. When they're only looking at what's wrong, they're only trying to rub your nose in what's not your strength, you never get to feel empowered, right? And it takes away, it like draws away from the fuel of growth because it's like you're always knocking someone down. It's really an important point that you just made that everybody should really note that we always want to elevate that one, what I call your secret power.
And that makes you unique. And that's that present you get to and the gift you get to bring to the world.
Exactly. You get to share that with the world, and you need these other four elements to help you share that one power with the world, because that's what you were brought into this world to do. Everybody has a mission. Everybody has a reason for being here. And there's nothing broken to fix. We're just trying to empower kids to feel like they have some purpose. They have a reason for existing. So many lost teenagers I see have no purpose. They had they, they're lost. And so we have to help them find that purpose.
And that ties in directly with the mission of Remarkable Parenting Academy is to bring awareness to intergenerational trauma.
Oh,
And
very important.
and the most important part is start understanding we're here to help eliminate children's suffering.
Yeah.
And because I've seen too many kids, especially at with the group that you and I are serving at Global Youth Leadership Summit, one of the questions that always gets asked is the walk of truth. And
Mm.
every year I've been doing this last 4 years, and every year I've seen where the kids, one of the questions they ask, how many of you know somebody, could be yourself as well, have thought about committing suicide? Not thinking about it, but actually have a written plan, written it down, and want to execute, but you didn't. And about on of the 4 years I've been there, on average is about 50 to 60% of the kids walk. So out of the 500 kids from all these different countries, we as caregivers, we as parents, we as teachers, whoever, adults, why are we having this conversation? Why?
Yeah.
It needs to be addressed. It needs to be
Well,
addressed.
well, I think you're bringing up such an important point. The intergenerational trauma that gets, I call it the gift that keeps on giving, is something that was not given a chance to resolve itself. So I do a lot of work with trauma. And the whole goal of trauma therapy is to give the body, which is where the trauma exists, not in the mind, in the body, a chance to actually finally resolve it, right? And it takes what's called pendulating. You in and you come out, you go back in, and you try to resolve it, right? It's through this kind of gentle but consistent way. The walk of truth is a great example of challenging yourself to release that trauma that may not even be yours. It may be your grandparents, or your father or your mother, but it doesn't mean you're blaming them. It means you're given the gift of a chance to resolve your father's trauma or your grandfather's trauma. You're here to release it, to resolve it, to heal it. And that's a gift. That's an opportunity, right? That all of us have intergenerational traumas that we come into the world with. But we are given the opportunity to finally break the cycle. And there are ways through challenge, there are ways to do that that allow us to find it. Here's an example. I never say to a kid, why are you feeling sad or mad or overwhelmed? Or I never say why. I say, where are you feeling sad in your body? Ask where, not why. Because where allows you to locate and release. Why is like, a carnival. Well, I can't find it. It's somewhere in my head. Why is a head question? Where is a body question? And every time, I'll say, well, is it in your shoulders? Is it in your neck? Is it in your chest? In your diaphragm? In your belly? In your fists? How does your body signal that you're anxious or afraid or whatever? How do you know? Not why. Stop asking why. That's like psychobabble. Where is very practical. Okay, let's tighten it up there and release it. Let's try it again. Release it, right? Where we're really releasing what's being held in the body. That's how you approach intergenerational trauma, not through talk therapy of why. Some stories matter. Narratives matter. Telling stories matter. But the physicality of trauma is what we want to release.
Yes, it's that mind, body, spirit connection.
100%. 100%.
And this is one of the reasons why I was really drawn to your work, because what I see you as a catalyst in society. We need more people just like you to bring this awareness so that people can understand and break their cycles of intergenerational trauma. So it's
Me
such an
and
honor.
you, Alan, me and you. We need voices like that in the world to inspire people not to be victims in the world. The opposite of a victim is a hero, right? The victim mentality doesn't serve us, right? It doesn't serve the higher calling that we've been placed on this planet to walk, right? Victim is very small. There are kids that are being bullied, and I on their body language, how to hold themselves with presence, and the bullies will leave them alone. But if they're in like this, all scrunched down and taught in like this, they're a target. They've made themselves a target without realizing that posture. I just gave a talk on posture, a webinar that's out there. I think it's coming out in November, on how posture allows you to walk the walk, right? Or a collapsed posture, head down. That's what some of the phone stuff and video game, the posture is all crunched down. That's a victim, right? The way we are present in our spine, aware of our spine and our feet on the ground and our head in the sky, what my Tai Chi teacher used to call, may he rest in peace, wearing the moon on your head at all times. Because that means literally someone's got your back. You're not alone in the world. Mother Earth has got you in her arms with gravity when you're standing tall and straight. And the heavens are right there, right? And, I've taught kids just how to walk, with a paper cup on on their head and not drop it, right? Just to be mindful of presence, right? So this intergenerational trauma, I think, is one of the great works that you're doing that only now being talked about. But it's not pointing a finger and blame. It's saying opportunity to finally break that cycle that may have been 10 generations, untraceable, right? I have family. My grandfather and grandmother were in Ukraine, in Kiev, right? And Odessa. When this war started, all this stuff that I didn't even realize I had in me. I never knew my grandparents. They died before I was born. And my father died young. So I didn't really have stories about them. But it brought this stuff up and I said, where is this coming from, right? Okay, opportunity to go deep into it, clear it. To heal my grandfather's trauma, he had to escape Ukraine back then in the, 1903 or something. So life presents opportunities for healing.
Thank you for sharing that personal story with Ukraine because we need it much right now. And it's really about this conversation is really about empowerment
100%.
and how do we empower others to bring awareness and then be able to change their own life and not fall back into the victim role.
Absolutely. That's actually good encapsulation of everything that you and I are trying to do. And I really hope, Alan, that we get another chance sometime to continue this conversation, whether it's next summer in San Diego or in between. We'll do another one of these talks because it's a joy talking to you. I really mean that. You are people like you in the world right now. It's so easy, right? There was no awkwardness in our conversation.
And likewise with you as well. I'm so honored and privileged to have you on our show. And thank you so much with your presence, your generosity. Like normally our podcast runs about, 40 minutes to about an hour. We gone through like almost an hour and a half and just flew by us. And
Yeah,
actually this conversation really felt like 10 minutes actually.
I know. Always,
That's when you live in the power of presence.
that's what presence is, right? When you're riding your bike, it's time kind of stands still, right? That's presence. That's what makes it so much fun. It's like a little kid. They have no if you think back on when those summer days when you were 5, it was like it went on forever. That's what this was like. 10 minutes or infinity. It doesn't really matter. That's the joy of connection. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me.
It's such an honor and pleasure. So how does one get a hold of you? You mentioned about your website, you mentioned
Yeah,
about
so
your,
there's website. I do a lot of webinars and podcasts that I've done. They're all on the internet. You can Google me. My website. Right now, I'm doing so much teaching and writing, different books and things, many projects in the works that I'm not really seeing new patients, right now because I'm in my 70s. I'm trying to stay alive in the presence of all these projects. I'm writing children's books, I'm doing all kinds. So, I'm very active and I want to be there for the patients that I've had. The pandemic threw a monkey wrench into my world. I thought I was going to have like time to garden and, shut down, but Zoom opened up the world. I was doing helping parents in Japan and Australia and England and Italy and all over that are still part of my practice now because they're not going away. And so it's not fair to bring new patients in if that's at the expense of the people that I'm dedicating myself to. So for the first time in 40 years, I've kind of very much limited that. But I'm out there, there's lots of places where you'll hear me teaching, and there's a great series that I did last year on the Three Wombs Academy. Three, the number three, WOMBS Academy. It's 11 hours of me talking with people about all kinds of stuff with kids. So you can bop in and get those. That's a fun place to hear some wacky talk about individualized care and empowerment.
thank you so much, Dr. Stephen, for your generosity. And it's an honor and pleasure to
Yeah,
have you
so
on the show.
if you post my is .com, I think,
Okay.
drstephencowan.com. I think.
I'll post it in the lower third
Post it.
here.
Yeah.
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 And also your link to the assessment as well.
Yeah, that's
That's
on my
super
website.
powerful. That's
Yeah.
super powerful. If you guys want to do that, because that will give you insights of your own pattern and your kid's pattern. And from there, you have an approach how to work with your ADHD
Well,
kid.
you have a map. You're
Yes.
given a map then that you can start orienting your skills on.
Yes. 100%. Okay. So until then, live purposely, love passionately, and be the most remarkable parent you're meant to be. We'll see you in future episodes.
Be well.